Jay, all of this Houston, Brooklyn, Harden, reunited with Durant talk, throw Kyrie into the mix. What's the very latest you're hearing?
So, Zubin, what I've been hearing from some of my sources in the Houston area is that regardless of whether James Harden wants to go to Brooklyn or not, regardless of him making statements or Russell Westbrook not wanting to be there, that Rafael Stone, the first-year GM, is probably not going to let this happen. He's going to hold James Harden and Russell Westbrook hostage, supposedly, to make sure that he can extract as much value as possible from any franchise that they decide to do a deal with. Now, Woj said last night during our pre-draft show that, they have not engaged in talks with the Brooklyn Nets yet. So the question is, how many assets does Houston need in order to make that deal go through? And do they have leverage by holding on to James Harden and Russell Westbrook until the season starts and let them actually play throughout the season to essentially give teams the flexibility to give them more in return until they feel comfortable with, hey, we're willing to accept all these assets for a trade of this sort.
JWill, I want to ask you something more on the Westbrook side. I know there's been kind of reports kind of floating out there a little bit about maybe John Wall in exchange for Russell Westbrook. Understanding that, John Wall is a couple of years younger, but the contract is kind of similar. What do you think as far as fit, knowing that Bradley Beal seems to play better without John Wall on the court? And also, what's the difference in play and chemistry as far as fitting from a basketball standpoint?
Well, look, on my end, I've heard that Bradley Beal has a great tightness with ownership in D.C. I actually see John Wall being moved before I would see Bradley Beal, unless Bradley Beal told them he wants to be out, which, look, there's some teams out there that he could be a pretty good fit with. But as it relates to Russell Westbrook and John Wall, I still, if I were Houston, I know that the trade market for Russell Westbrook isn't as strong as it might have been 3 years ago, but I'm still trying to extract as much value. So let's play this out. Key, like you and I, we're Rafael Stone, we're Steven Silas, we're all part of the Houston management. Like, we're going to have a season in which we aren't going to be that good anyway. So if we don't feel like whatever team that we're potentially going to negotiate with is willing to give as much as we feel like we deserve for James Harden and Russell Westbrook, you have to pay them their contract anyway. Make them play.
If I'm the coach and I'm Silas, I don't want to have an unhappy player, let alone two unhappy players, no matter what the contracts are like. I don't want to make my job harder. Not that they would be unprofessional. I just don't want to take that on. You know what I'm saying, Jay? Like, I would try and get management to move them for whatever at this point, because if they don't want to be there, it makes my job harder as a head coach to try to get them to buy in to what I'm teaching. Everyone's not Chris Paul. Everyone's not going to approach it the same way, especially if, you know how we are as athletes. Once our minds are made up about something, that's what we go with. If James Harden's heart and mind is made up that he wants to be in Brooklyn, to try to force him to stay in Houston, that's not a good idea.
Final minute, Jay.
But
No, I'm with you, Zub. And I hear what you're saying, Key, but at the same time, if you're ownership or if you're management, you may not want to be there, but I'm going to make sure that before you get moved, I'm getting the most value for what I feel like an MVP of his caliber deserves.
Oh, man, my back hurt.
It don't matter. Your back can be hurt. Then that becomes a narrative on you.
It didn't become the narrative on AD.
So, Jay.
It did, though, Key, a little bit. It did, though, Key.
He wanted to go to, Jay.
It did. Yeah, it took Rich Paul in order to make some of these deals happen, but it wasn't a nice sight for AD in New Orleans during that time. He got really bad for him.
Jay Weezy, I guess what I'm asking is the Bradley Beal and John Wall, it seems like that's a move that can improve both teams. It looks like maybe John Wall would be a better fit because he can shoot and he's a different player than Westbrook, but it looks like Bradley Beal's need that type of pit bull. Maybe in Washington makes them a contender.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN Plus right now.